Hi, and welcome to another episode of DisinfoBites. So in today's episode, I want to talk to you a little bit about propaganda. Now, propaganda as a technique has been used throughout history, a long time. But the first use of the word propaganda in a modern sense was in an organization called the Sacra Congregatio de Propaganda Fide, or for short, Propaganda Fide. Now, this was an office of the Catholic Church, and the translation is the Sacred Congregation of the Propagation for the Propagation of the Faith. Now, this office was created in 1622 by Pope Gregory XV, and the purpose of the organization was to make sure that the word of the Catholic Church was spread as wide as possible and as accurately as possible. Now, propaganda, we all sort of have a feeling for what propaganda is, and part of the problem with propaganda is that there is no actually formal, widely accepted definition of the word propaganda. In fact, that reminds me of a case that went before the Supreme Court, and Justice Potter Stewart, when he was looking, it was about pornography, and Justice Potter Stewart says, well, I may not be able to define it, but I know it when I see it. So I'm going to take that approach with you a little bit and start out with an example. So the first example is something called was a document called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion was minutes of a meeting held by senior Jewish elder statesmen where they were discussing their plans for global domination. Now, this thing, of course, was a forgery. It came out in 1903. It was put out by the Tsarist secret police, the Okhrana, which was the predecessor of the KGB. Many of you might believe that the KGB invented this kind of tricks. They inherited lots of their plays from the Tsarist secret police. That thing was so popular in the 20s. Henry Ford picked this up. Henry Ford picked it up, and he said, you've had 500,000 copies of this thing printed up and distributed. And later in the 20s, when the London Times debunked this thing as a forgery, Ford kind of shrugged his shoulders and said, well, okay, I got bad information, but it's still believable. This thing persisted. It was used by Nazi school teachers as assigned reading for their children. It was used by the Soviets. This thing still existed. It's still out there and available on the internet for download. This fantastic thing has persisted for 100 years. Now, the important thing to say about this is described as black propaganda. So this is an example of black propaganda. There's also white propaganda and gray propaganda. We'll get to that later. But the idea is that you attribute something to your target that you're attacking. So these protocols came from the Jews, supposedly. And it's designed so it's something they said, and it makes them look really, really bad. So that's the idea with that. That's black propaganda. So false attribution, making them look really bad. Now, on the other hand, white propaganda is about open attribution. You know where it's coming from. It has a well-defined purpose, nothing hidden. It tries to do a job. And both white and black propaganda, they're all trying to get you to think a certain way, to believe a certain way, to act a certain way. All of those together. Now, in white propaganda, it's the same kind of a trick that you use in black propaganda, as a matter of fact. The same type of persuasive techniques. They're not trying to engage you in an interactive argument. It's a message. They're telling you something. It's on point, on message, one-way conversation to get you to change your views or to take a specific action. And as an example of white propaganda, look at the poster on this page. This was put up by the Women's Apparel Association in World War II. And the idea of this was to raise money to help war victims. Now, if you look at the picture, you see that the war victims in the picture, well, they're kind of unspecified. It isn't really who they are. They're just war victims, and you use your imagination to figure that out. But the text on the poster is no mistaken about it, right? It says, don't let them die. You can save them. And the way you save them is by, of course, sending money. Send money. That's the idea. And the implication underneath is if you don't send the money, they will die, and it's going to be your fault. So the key here, again, is emotional manipulation. This is not about reasoning. This is not about logical arguments. This is about pure, unadulterated emotional manipulation. Both white, black, and gray propaganda all have that feature in common. It's quite remarkable. So I think that's it for me for today. Thank you for listening, and I hope to speak with you again soon.